السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We continue inshallah ta'ala with the book of al-Murbi بشرح زاد المستقنع, and we're starting باب صلاة الجماعة. Before we start, I remind myself and everyone again, we are in the month of Sha'ban, and one of the what's mentioned about the month of Sha'ban in the hadith of Usama ibn Zayd radiallahu anhu, which is a sound hadith, that the Prophet ﷺ, when he was asked about fasting in the month of Sha'ban, mentioned the reason why he would fast in the month of Sha'ban more than any other month, as you already heard and know the hadith. He said, ذلك شهر يغفل الناس عنه بين رجب ورمضان وهو شهر ترفع فيه الأعمال إلى رب العالمين فأحب أن يرفع عملي وأنا صائم. The month that people are forgetful between Rajab and Ramadan, and it's a month where the deeds are elevated, rise, وهو شهر ترفع فيه الأعمال. The deeds are presented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and الرفع is when something is elevated. And he says, and I love for my action to be presented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala while I'm fasting. So that's, what's the reason why of, fasting? First of all, just to be watchful of ourselves in this month. For a person, when the deeds are presented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and raised to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that the person is aware of that. He wants to seal the year with the best actions, with repentance, with good deeds. And as-siyam la idla lah, as the Prophet ﷺ, he said, there's no like of it when it comes to the rewards. And especially when people are in a state of forgetfulness. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us to do what is best, and one of which is, of course, is to seek knowledge. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept, inshallah. So going through the book, inshallah, باب صلاة الجماعة. باب صلاة الجماعة. He says in the road, شرعت لأجل التواصل والتوادد وعدم التقاطع. He mentioned here some of the wisdom behind صلاة الجماعة. شرعت, again from the past tense, and the ta refers to Salatul Jama'ah because it's mu'annath with shuri'at. That means it's legislated, it's part of the deen. For what reason? لأجل, because of the reason of التواصل. التواصل from الصلة. That's even one of the meanings of the salah, because of the connection, meaning from صلة الرحم even. Like the connection of the hearts and the relationships between people, that as a result of it, many great deeds to be observed, many rites to be observed, and also tests where people are tested with one another to be kind towards one another and to avoid what negates this from at-tadabur and enmity and envy and things of that nature. So لأجل التواصل, for people to connect with one another, والتوادد from al-mawadda, which is to show one's love to others. And that's one of the duties upon those who pray Jama'ah together. That is not grounds for people to have enmity towards one another. And this is one of the meanings that many overlook. And the shaitan, he knows this, and that's why one of the things that he never give up on, as the Prophet ﷺ, he said, that in the hadith, that الشيطان أيس أن يعبد في جزيرة العرب. So that the shaitan, he gave up on being worshipped. أن يعبده, أو in one of the narration, إن الشيطان قد أيس أن يعبده المصلون. The shaitan, he gave up on the musallun, or the people worshipping him. The people of Salah, they won't worship him. ولكن في التحريش بينهم. إن الشيطان قد أيس أن يعبده المصلون في جزيرة العرب. Shaitan gave up on المصلون في جزيرة العرب. They would worship him, ولكن what he's not given up on, في التحريش بينهم. التحريش بينهم is to have enmity towards one another. So he enticed this enmity for the people in the masajid. This is the work of shaitan. And that's why you would find all kinds of things in the masajid, because the shaitan is working. But the plots of shaitan are weak. And that's why when the iman is strong and the person understands this, then part of one of the wisdom of Salatul Jama'ah is at-tawadud. One of the ways to eliminate the ways of the shaitan is to show the love. You don't have to act based on what you feel. Just the fact that people are in the masjid is to show the concern towards them, the nasiha, to show the love towards them. لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. And the nusus and the texts are so many in this, and not the opposite. وعدم التقاطع, and to stay away from التقاطع or severing the relationship. And this is one or some of the things that comes as a result of Salatul Jama'ah, and one of the wisdom of it, so that people are aware of it. So then, from the fiqh perspective, then he says, تلزم الرجال. تلزم الرجال. Salatul Jama'ah is obligatory upon men. تلزم الرجال. It's not obligatory upon women. And as established before, and it's going to be mentioned, that the best place for women for the salah is to be prayed at home. And they are not to be prevented from coming to the masjid. So it's permissible for them, but it's not the most rewardable place for them to make the salah. And if they do, there are conditions, of course, to be observed. So, but it's mandatory upon men. تلزم الرجال. And then he mentions in the Sharh al-Ahrar. Now these are the qualities or the characteristics. Not all men have to be free. So if there was slavery, the slave, this is not obligatory upon him. Al-Qadirin, those who are able to, because it requires actions, requires going to the masjid. So therefore, many might not be able to. And Al-Qudra here, also it's going to be mentioned, whether it's the individual Qudra, the individual ability, the physical ability that a person would have, versus sometimes the Qudra is there, but there are other circumstances that would prevent him from going to the masjid. Then this is also valid. But also one of the things that we have to be seeing here is this is called Salatul Jama'ah. So Salatul Jama'ah is one ruling. Salatul Jama'ah in the masjid is another ruling. Right? So Salatul Jama'ah at all times, تلزم الرجال. Men, they have to pray Salatul Jama'ah for the Fard Salah at all times, even if they miss it in the masjid, if they're able to. So Al-Qadirin. So before we continue, I know this is going to be covered again, but just to make sure that it's clear from the very beginning, say for example, a man, he missed the Salah in the masjid, Salatul Jama'ah in the masjid. Then he need to find someone to pray with him, Jama'ah. If he's at home, he would pray with someone at home. What if there's nobody? Right? In that case, he's not qadir. He's not able to pray Salatul Jama'ah, then it's okay to pray alone. And that's why even ولو سفرا في شدة خوف, even if he's traveling, في شدة خوف, in an intense fear. So Salatul Jama'ah is wajiba, is an obligation upon men, even if they're travelers. So if a man is traveling, if there are a group of them, of course, this is obvious, they would pray Jama'ah. If he's traveling alone and it's time for the Salah, if he finds someone to pray Jama'ah with him, then it's an obligation upon him. If he's not finding anyone to pray Jama'ah with him, then he's not qadir in this case. He's not able then. And al-Qudra here, as he said, is not just, it's not like he is himself is not able to, but rather he's able to pray Salatul Jama'ah, but there's no one to pray Jama'ah with. Requires another person to be with him. So he doesn't find any. So that means that's fine. That means it's not lazima for him in this case because it's beyond his capacity. He says, وَلَوْ سَفَرًا في شدة خوف. The madhab here is that شدة الخوف does not change the ruling. The intense fear, as we know that it's always mentioned that one of the excuses for missing Salatul Jama'ah in the masjid is the khawf. Person is afraid for his own self if he goes to the masjid. That's one of the excuses, of course. Right? But here, since it's Salatul Jama'ah, so it doesn't matter whether it's intense fear or not. Salatul Jama'ah needs to be observed. And the evidence that according to the opinion of the madhab here is because of the ayat of Salatul Khawf, for example, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered the believers when they are in the battlefield to pray Salatul Fard in Jama'ah. And if not just that, some of the wajibat, some of the obligatory matters have been compromised in Salatul Khawf to make sure that they pray it in Jama'ah. So as a principle, right, that the ulama mentioned, that لا يترك الواجب إلا لواجب. You don't leave a wajib, you don't leave an obligation unless there's another obligation. So when they leave some of the obligatory actions in the salah because of Salatul Khawf, that's to still continue to pray in Jama'ah. That means Salatul Jama'ah here is wajib, is obligatory thing, even with the intense fear. So this is where this is mentioned for وَلَوْ سَفَرًا فِي شِدَّةِ خَوْفٍ. Of course, in general, and this is now personal experiences might occur. If a person is not able to, or he fear for his life, that's a different situation here. Things to be then examined. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful. So, but here just to get to know the general meaning or the general rulings of these masail. So, تلزم الرجال الأحرار القادرين ولو سفرا في شدة خوف. ولو سفرا في شدة خوف. When تلزم الرجال للصلوات الخمس. So only for الصلوات الخمس, which is the فرض. المؤداة وجوب عين. Now all of the صلوات الخمس, it has to be مؤداة. المؤداة يعني is prayed أداء, not قضاء, not the missed صلوات. So if someone missed a salah last year and he remembered it, does he have to pray it in jama'ah? No. It's only the salah that is to be prayed أداء in the time of the salah. المؤداة وجوب عين. وجوب عين, that means this is the salah is obligatory for each person. So this is that Salatul Jama'ah is wujub ayn, that each man is able to make with the conditions, then they have to make it in Jama'ah. wujub ayn. لقوله تعالى, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذَا كُنْتَ فِيهِمْ فَأَقَمْتَ لَهُمُ الصَّلَاةَ فَلْتَقُمْ طَائِفَةٌ مِّنْهُمْ مَعَكَ. The ayah of الخوف, Salatul Khawf. So فأمر بالجماعة حال الخوف ففي غيره أولى. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered the people to make Salatul Jama'ah in the state of al-khawf, ففي غيره أولى. في غير الخوف أولى. Then it's more than likely to be an obligation if there's no khawf. If there's amn, if there's security, a person is secure to make Salatul Jama'ah, then it's obviously an obligation. So wujub ayn here refers to Salatul Jama'ah in general. The issue of al-khawf, there's differences of opinions and different levels of khawf, of course. But here we're talking about the hukm of Salatul Jama'ah in general, not at the times of fear. This is Salatul Jama'ah. What's the hukm of Salatul Jama'ah? Here is that it's wajib. Why? Because one of the evidences, and he mentioned also the hadith, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered the believers to pray Salatul Jama'ah while in state of fear in the battlefield. So that means if they're in state of security, then this is even more important. ولحديث أبي هريرة المتفق عليه. And also for the hadith of Abi Hurairah رضي الله عنه, أثقل صلاة على المنافقين صلاة العشاء والفجر. The heaviest, the most difficult salah on the munafiqeen, on the hypocrites, is Salatul Isha and Salatul Fajr. وَلَوْ يَعْلَمُونَ مَا فِيهِمَا لَأَتَوْهُمَا وَلَوْ حَبُوهَا. And if they know what's in these two salah, from the fadl and the reward, لَأَتَوْهُمَا, they would come to it even if it's crawling. And مَا فِيهِمَا, it's left like this. So وَلَوْ يَعْلَمُونَ مَا فِيهِمَا, whether it's from the rewards or for if they know what they're missing, and the part of the wajib, if you leave the wajib, that means a person is subjected to the punishment of Allah. They would come to it even if they have to crawl. وَلَقَدْ هَمَمْتُ أَنْ آمُرَ بِالصَّلَاةِ. The Prophet ﷺ said, لَقَدْ هَمَمْتُ. Al-ham is to have the intention, is to do, it's different than just the intention. It's a level that comes after the intention. So, وَلَقَدْ هَمَمْتُ, that means I almost about to make an آمُرَ بالصلاة فتقام, that I would command for the salah to be established. uh, ثم آمر رجلا, then I would command a man, فيصلي بالناس, to pray, to lead the people in the salah. ثم أنطلق معي, then I أنطلق, الانطلاق is to set in a journey or to leave. ثم أنطلق, then I leave, and with me men, معهم حزم من حطب, and with me men with حزم. الحزمة is the set of sticks or wood, إلى قوم لا يشهدون الصلاة, to people, those who do not witness the salah. فأحرق عليهم بيوتهم بالنار, and I would burn their homes with the fire. So the Prophet ﷺ, of course, he didn't do that, but it shows the importance of Salatul Jama'ah. And in some of the narrations, because of the women and children in the home, so intended that this is to show the importance of Salatul Jama'ah, and those who would miss it, this is one of the characteristics of hypocrisy. So this is the hukm of Salat al-Jama'ah. Then he says, لا شرط. لا شرط, that means the hukm of Salatul Jama'ah is not a condition for the acceptance of the Salah. أي صلاة الجماعة ليست شرطا في الإجزاء أو صحة الصلاة. It says أي ليست الجماعة شرطا لصحة الصلاة. What does that mean? And this is, there's another opinion that people might have with, because of some of the hadith. That means if someone was able to make Salatul Jama'ah, no excuses whatsoever, and he missed Salatul Jama'ah, some said his salah is invalid to start with, because of some of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that talks about la salata لجار المسجد إلا في المسجد. There's no salah for the one that is close to the masjid, the neighbor of the masjid, except in the masjid, and other narrations. But here, according to what's the opinion of the madhab and the majority of the ulama, of course, that it's not a condition for the validity of the salah. It's wajib, that means if a person misses it without an excuse, it's sinful. But if he prays alone, he committed a sin if there's no excuse, according to that. But the salah is valid. The salah is valid. That means it counts as the salah. فتصح صلاة المنفرد بلا عذر. So صلاة المنفرد, the person praying alone, تصح, صلاته صحيحة. And if it's صحيحة, if it's valid, that means it's not to be repeated. But again, without عذر. Without عذر. وفي صلاته فضل. And his salah is fadl, meaning virtue or rewards. So this is the hukm of whether it's shart or not. So this is not a shart. The Salatul Jama'ah is not shart for the validity of the salah. It's only wajib in itself. That means a person has to make sure that he doesn't miss it. Now, so this is with regards to the hukm of Salatul Jama'ah, that it's wajiba وليست شرطا. ليست شرطا, as we heard. He says وصلاة الجماعة أفضل ب27 درجة. وصلاة الجماعة أفضل ب27 درجة. That means it's more virtue with 27 levels of rewards. لحديث ابن عمر المتفق عليه. صلاة الجماعة تفضل صلاة الفذ ب27 درجة. That you have it here in the footnotes. So this is when it comes to the rewards. And those who said that Salatul Jama'ah is only recommended because of that hadith, that's not an evidence that it's a recommended acts as a recommended act only. Because there are things you would find that is mentioned, this is better than this, but it doesn't take away the obligation from it. So, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, تؤمنون بالله ورسوله وتجاهدون في سبيل الله بأموالكم وأنفسكم ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون. To believe in Allah and His Messenger and to fight for the sake of Allah with your own wealth and your own self, this is better for you if you do know. So that means is better for you, خير لكم. When it comes to the iman, that means if a person is not upon al-iman, it's okay, but it's better to have iman? No. So the same thing here. You can't say because of the hadith that Salatul Jama'ah is more in rewards by 27 levels, that if a person prays alone without an excuse, it's okay, and Salatul Jama'ah is only recommended because the hadith. No, this is the rewards of it. But the other hadiths we heard before and the action of the Prophet ﷺ is in such a way that shows that Salatul Jama'ah is wajibah. But again, in the madhab here is the Jama'ah, Salatul Jama'ah in itself. To pray in the masjid, this is a different rulings. He says, وَتَنْعَقِدُ بِاثْنَيْنِ Salatul Jama'ah tan'aqid, and we talked about the word tan'aqid. It means it's a person becomes in Salatul Jama'ah. It counts as Salatul Jama'ah, is established by two people. ولو بأنثى. So two people, different than Salatul Jumu'ah. So two people is sufficient, is enough for Salatul Jama'ah to be established. ولو بأنثى وعبد. Even if it's a man leading a woman, or a abd or a slave. في غير جمعة وعيد. Not in Jumu'ah or Eid, because this has different rulings to it as far as the numbers. لا بصبي في فرض. Now الصبي, a young child in Salatul Fard, according to the madhab, if he's the only one present with an adult, then it doesn't count as Salatul Jama'ah. And they mentioned the reason for that is that it is not permissible for the Sabiya, for the child. His imama is not valid. His imama is not valid according to the madhab. So since it's not valid for him to be imam, that means if he's the only one praying Salatul Fard with an adult, that does not constitute or counts as Salatu Jama'ah, right? But there's another riwayah narration that it counts because, as the ulama they mentioned, because the opinion because his imamah is not valid, they would say if a person leading the salah and the ma'mum with one person, and that one person is ummi, and imamatul ummi, the ummi is the one, not the one that is illiterate necessarily, but the one that is not able to recite Surah Al-Fatiha. So if two people, one is able to recite Surah Al-Fatiha and one doesn't know how to recite Surah Al-Fatiha, of course, the one that doesn't know how to recite Surah Al-Fatiha is not permissible for him to lead. So the one that leads and he has only one person with him, the Salatul Jama'ah is valid in this case. So even though the Ummi, the one that is not able to recite Surah Al-Fatiha, his imamah, for him to be imam is not valid, but they validated the Salatul Jama'ah if he's a ma'mum, as one ma'mum only. So why then they differentiate between that and the Sabi? So whatever is the other narration, that it's okay if it's Sabi, if he's someone that is aware of the Salah, and he would make the Salah with its conditions and pillars and so on. But this is a mas'ala to note. لا بصبي في فرض. To understand here what's in the book, they made an exception here. If one man is leading the salah with one sabi, one child, it does not count as Salatul Jama'ah. He says, so this is an iqad, Salatul Jama'ah by two, and that second person, or that first, or that one person with the imam, even if it's a female, even if it's a slave, but not Jumu'ah and Eid, and not a sabi. وَلَهُ فِعْلُهَا, for the man, he has the validity to do it. وَلَهُ, for him, it's permissible to do it, meaning Salatul Jama'ah, أي الجماعة في بيته, in his home. لعموم حديث جعلت لي الأرض مسجدا وطهورا وفعلها في المسجد هو السنة. Because of the hadith, the earth has been made for me a place of salah, masjid, and a place of purification with the tayammum. وفعلها في المسجد هو السنة. And to do it in the masjid is the sunnah. And of course, not to miss the sunnah. So the jama'ah in the house, it's permissible to do it at one's place. But of course, this is the other riwayah that it has to be done in the masjid, and especially with the hadith that we just mentioned earlier. And people might say that what if a person was praying jama'ah at home? So it shows that the jama'ah, and this is how the jama'ah was established at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So the other riwayah of Imam Ahmad, that it's wajibah, meaning in the masjid, that Salatul Jama'ah fil masjid wajibah. And this is what Sheikh Taymiyyah and others, they chose. And that's the action of the Prophet ﷺ. But we take this ruling in some situations where, say for example, there are so many people in the house, and for all of them to go to the masjid and to come back again, this might be inconvenient, right? So then we take that ruling. Then it's okay to pray jama'ah in the house. Things like this, but not to make it the norm. Not to make it the norm. For some exceptional situations, things like that. And that doesn't have to be with the a'dhar of tark salat al-jama'ah. It doesn't have to be like fear or rain or anything. No, they all present, but there's lots of people, lots of numbers of people. And for them to leave and come back, this might be inconvenient. Then we take that it's permissible then in that case. And the Prophet ﷺ prayed jama'ah in the house with, as the hadith when he went to the house of one of the Ansar to make jama'ah there, because sometimes they're not able to come to the masjid because of the flood. And the Prophet ﷺ went there to make the Salatul Jama'ah there when there was no floods or anything, just to make sure that this is approved, the people would see it and they would pray there. And other narrations when the Prophet ﷺ prayed at home when he was sick عليه الصلاة والسلام. So وهو فعلها في بيته. وتسن لنساء منفردات. وتسن, that means it's recommended for women, منفردات, for women if they're alone. That means it's so for women Salatul Jama'ah is not wajib. Salatul Jama'ah for women, it's not an obligation, but it's recommended for them if they are together to pray جماعة. ويكره لحسناء حضورها مع رجال منفردات, and of course that means they're together, then they can pray جماعة. ويكره لحسناء حضورها مع رجال, as far as for the women to go to the masjid to pray with men, as long as there's no fitna, there's no grounds for fitna, sins, people seeing one another, not lowering the gazes, things like this, women not wearing proper hijab. So here they mention لحسناء, which is حسناء meaning beautiful, because of the fitna. حضورها مع رجال. ويباح لغيرها, and it's permissible for other than her. Other meaning someone that is not someone old in age, for example, or so, then it's easier than someone that is young and might be attractive to others and things like this. So it's all just to show that if there's fitna, then of course to avoid the fitna. ومجالس الوعظ كذلك وأولى. And the same thing with مجالس الوعظ, gatherings of knowledge and reminders and things like that. It's the same ruling, takes the same ruling, وأولى, and more even, because this is lesser of an obligation or virtue than Salatul Jama'ah. And then he says, وتستحب صلاة أهل الثغر في مسجد واحد. Now وتستحب, it's recommended, the salah of أهل الثغر. أهل الثغر, the people of the frontiers. الثغر is the borders where the enemies might come from that direction. So they're protecting their nation. So they are not to leave their spots, their places. So, and some cities are called the cities where the thughur of the Muslimin, where the enemies, if they come, they will come through that city. So there's the hadith where it talks about the virtue of being there or living even there, because this is means to protect the ummah or to protect the people. So now people living in these types of places, then it's recommended for them to pray a موضع المخافة. أهل الثغر is موضع المخافة, the place of fear, because this is where they fear the enemies will come from that position. في مسجد واحد, it's recommended for them to pray all in one masjid. Why? لأنه أعلى للكلمة وأوقع للهيبة, because it's more of the word of unity to be together, because they need to be united, because the people in such context, if they are divided among themselves, this is ground for defeat. وأوقع الهيبة, and more of the hayba, the respect or the fear of that would be in the hearts of their enemies when they see them all together. But again, this is because of what's mentioned here, this can change, might be the opposite. If people in such situation and the enemies would see them all together, this can be easy target for the enemies. So if it's what is best is for them to be divided, then this is what is best for them. And this is something that the people of authority would recommend or would command, and they would follow that. Then after that, it's going to talk about the different levels of afdaliyah or virtue when it comes to where to pray Salatul Jama'ah more. You have more than one option in Salatul Jama'ah. Masjid that is close versus the masjid that is far. Masjid that is old versus masjid that is new, and other things. So this is where it goes on from this here, but I would rather to keep it for next time, inshallah ta'ala, so that we take it all at once, inshallah ta'ala, which is al-afdalu li ghayrihim. This is now what is best for other than them, meaning Ahl al-Thagr, the people of al-Thagr or al-Thugur, the frontiers. Then where is the best place to make Salatul Jama'ah in order here? And there's some differences of opinions with some of the orders that I mentioned. So we'll stop here, inshallah ta'ala, in the middle of page number 334. Any questions from what we just covered here? Not much, but if you have any questions, please go ahead, inshallah. And the attendance code is Salatul Jama'ah. Now, for الصبي, is it defined as between the ages of 7 to 10, or would this be for the younger than 7? الصبي, when it's mentioned in general like this, it refers to the one that is lesser than the age of puberty. He's not mukallaf yet. So they only mention that if he's the only one. He's the only one present. But again, this is the other opinion, which is the valid opinion, which the ulama are upon, is that it's valid. Because the hadith of Amr ibn Hajr and others, where he led his people when he was 7 years old. So if he's able to lead his people, then this is Babi Awla, is even more likely for him to be ma'mum, if it's only one ma'mum. Another question? Can you explain وَفِي صَلَاتِهِ فَضْلِ? That means that the one praying alone, his salah is still rewardable. Yes, but he still committed a sin. So the sin is there by missing Salatul Jama'ah without an excuse. And in his salah is fadl. Since it's valid, that means there is fadl in his salah. So since there is because of the hadith that his salah in jama'ah is more in rewards with 27 times than when he prays alone. That means this is ثبت بها الأجر if أو صلى منفردا. That by this hadith by itself, it affirms that he gets a reward even if he prays alone. And of course, if he has udhr, if he has an excuse, he gets the full reward as if he prayed it in jama'ah, of course. If the person have intermittent incontinence, and when he comes for jama'ah, his incontinence will be for 20 minutes and it later ceases, so he continue prayer or wait for leakage to stop. For the one that has salas, or his urine or gas does not stop, and this is a condition, then in that case, to still pray in jama'ah, and for that person is to, what's sufficient for him is to make wudu for every salah. Just before he goes to the masjid, for example, he makes his wudu and he cleans himself and he makes wudu, and then he goes to the masjid. And what happens from that moment till he finishes the salah does not invalidate the salah. Salah is valid. So to pray in jama'ah, this is something to be observed, and not to say that to miss the salah. And if he knows that it's after 20 minutes, it ceases, then he should then have the habit of being prepared before the time of enough time to make it for Salatul Jama'ah. But if he forgets or he is late, then to do this, to make wudu right before the salah, so that he does not miss Salatul Jama'ah. Allahu A'lam. طيب, barakallahu fikum. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept, inshallah. And make sure, again, as we agreed upon, when it comes to the matun, you cannot miss a word in it. You have to make sure that you understand every word of it, and it's the masail and things like this, inshallah. And as far as the same book can be studied in many different levels. So this is the ground level, this is the first level. And then to go and excel afterwards, inshallah ta'ala, with more of the evidences and even differences of opinions and the like of that, inshallah. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.